the biggest story that I believe continues to grow bigger and bigger, even though many different people are refusing to talk about it, Deshaun Watson. There now are over 20 lawsuits that have been filed alleging sexual assault against Deshaun Watson, and his attorney, Rusty Hardin, evidently decided that he wanted to try to make Deshaun Watson look better. So he had 18 different masseuses come forward and say they had massaged Deshaun Watson and not had anything inappropriate happen to them. And somehow he thought that made Deshaun Watson look better. I don't know what logical angle he was trying to hit here. So let me explain. I'm going to put on my lawyer hat a little bit and also talk about the continuing conundrum and the massive amounts of difficulties that continue to grow surrounding Deshaun Watson. So let's start here. Okay? Just because you didn't commit a crime with some people isn't evidence that you didn't commit a crime with others. So let's take this away from Deshaun Watson. If you were robbing banks, if you robbed 10 banks, and then your attorney said, my client didn't rob those banks, and here are the affidavits of other banks where my client has been and has bank accounts, and he didn't rob those banks, so that proves he didn't rob the other banks. No. It doesn't work that way. Only dumb people actually accept that logic. Let me take it another step further. If you are accused of murder in this country, most of the time it would mean that you have killed someone, which is wildly outside of normal behavior for you. Yes, there are serial killers, but most people who are charged with murder are not serial killers. So if you came out and said, hey, guess what? My client hasn't killed 99.9% of the people that he's ever met, it doesn't mean you didn't murder the other guy or girl that you're accused of murdering. This is a huge red flag to me that Rusty Hardin, the attorney for Deshaun Watson, stepped right into, because what this says to me is, at a minimum, at an absolute minimum, we now know over the last couple of years, Deshaun Watson has had 40 or more different women who were his masseuses. Think about that for a minute. I bet there isn't another pro athlete in America who is even close to 40 or more different masseuses. And oh, by the way, I bet those athletes aren't reaching out to women on Instagram asking total strangers to give them massages. This is super weird behavior by Deshaun Watson. Now, it remains to be seen whether it's criminal or whether he has civil liability for it. But at some point, all of this behavior is adding up. And a lot of you out there, I think, are looking around and saying, wait a minute, why did this dude have over 40 different women giving him massages? This is not some sort of therapeutic treatment, because if it were, let's take it outside of the massage industry and let's think about athletic trainers. Athletes, because they make money off of their body, if they find an athletic trainer that they love, they will stay committed to that athletic trainer for years and potentially decades. They might even hire that athletic trainer to work for them alone if they are really, really committed to that work and find that they are getting tremendous value from that athletic trainer. Same thing is true if you think about it for an athlete perspective when it comes to massage. If you believe that you are getting a competitive advantage because your body is in better shape because of massages, you keep the masseuse who is the best. You aren't randomly setting yourself up for appointments with people that you don't even know time after time after time. You don't get massages over and over again from these strangers. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with the criminal investigation aspect of these cases. The plaintiff's attorney, Tony Busby, says that he's got he basically doesn't trust the Houston Police Department. And in particular, I've got a quote here. It's kind of strange, I think, but this whole case is very strange in many respects. Tony Busby says, and I quote, "My legal opponent, Mr. Hardin, has a son who is on the exclusive command staff of Houston Police Department. I'm not saying in any way Deshaun Watson's lawyer, Mr. Hardin, has a son who has a position that would compromise Houston Police Department, its investigation. I support his service along with all Houston police officers. I think the rank and file know that." But he now says that he doesn't feel comfortable going to the Houston Police Department and, quote, that his clients will go elsewhere to provide our evidence to investigative authorities. That's an interesting statement. Now, there are multiple different states and jurisdictions where some of these stories could be in play. It also could be a federal offense if Deshaun Watson is hiring people, committing sexual assaults against them, and bringing these women across state lines for purposes of these actions. So could there be a federal investigation as opposed to just a local investigation, and or could there be investigations in other states surrounding Deshaun Watson's behavior, considering right now, I believe, 3 or 4 different states are the locations of these alleged incidents. It's a messy, messy situation. And I actually think this story is being wildly undercovered in the media because so many people are afraid of ending up a target of 2 different identity politics-laden sides of this equation. Let me explain what I mean by that. So many people in my industry, in the sports media, are terrified that they might say something inappropriate that offends women who are alleging that they have been sexually assaulted. There now are 21 different women plus who have made allegations of sexual assault against Deshaun Watson. And so if a media member comes out and says something that indicates that they don't believe those women, many different members of the sports media live in perpetual fear of mobs on social media and are terrified that they might actually be canceled at some point or the other. And so they don't want to say anything about a case like this. On the flip side, you have a black quarterback. And many people in the sports media are terrified of being called racist as well. So you have both women and the black quarterback on 2 different sides of the identity politics ledger here that are going head to head. Somebody is lying. I mean, that's the big takeaway, right? We have reached the point where it's impossible that this is a misunderstanding. A lot of times in he said, she said situations, it's very difficult to figure out when there's no witnesses what happened behind closed doors with one man and one woman. Man may believe one thing, woman may believe the other thing. They may both believe that they are telling the truth, and it's left to the justice system to figure out what that truth is. Both sides can legitimately believe their side of the story and that they have done, in the man's case, oftentimes nothing wrong, and in the woman's case, that the man did misbehave. In other words, both sides can completely 100% believe that they are telling the truth, and there's likely evidence to corroborate that they are telling the truth, and it can be very difficult to figure out what happened in those cases. This is not one of those cases. Either Deshaun Watson is a sexual predator who decided to prey on masseuses by paying them and then getting them behind a closed door and attempting to persuade them to engage in sexual activity with him. And he did that dozens of times. Or we are talking about all of these women deciding to lie and make up these allegations. Those are the 2 sides of the equation. And if you ask me to put my lawyer hat on and pretend that I am a judge looking at all this evidence, trying to figure out where the truth is, I find it much more likely that one person, a.k.a. Deshaun Watson, would lie than that 21 different women masseuses would lie, all telling some version of a similar story that they had in their massage appointments with Deshaun Watson. Remember, these women are, if they're making it up, there are large parts of their story that would be true. If Deshaun Watson never got a massage from them, that would be a made-up story. It seems like the defense, basically, that's going to be uttered by Deshaun Watson is that either he didn't behave ever inappropriately or that occasionally he may have had sexual contact with the people who were giving him the massage, but he believed that it was consensual. His defense, it does not appear, is going to be, I never met these women, I didn't know them at all. And so arguing that the 21 women are mistaken and that your behavior was misinterpreted is a lot harder argument to make for Deshaun Watson when you look at all the different evidence in these cases. And the statement that Tony Busby, the attorney, made on Instagram about going somewhere other than the Houston Police Department makes me believe that he may be cooperating with some federal authorities for potential federal criminal charges, which are even more severe for Deshaun Watson than state criminal charges, because federal prosecutors and investigators are able to use the full might and power of the United States government behind them, or that Tony Busby is going outside of the state of Texas and is engaging with investigators in other states. I believe Georgia and California, among other states, are also mentioned in these lawsuits and allegations against Deshaun Watson. So this is a big story. Oh, by the way, did he violate COVID protocol all throughout these massages? I know it's a relatively small aspect here, but I would think that going to all of these different women for treatment and being in close contact with all of them during the course of the NFL season would put Deshaun Watson outside the acceptable behavior for COVID protocols while he was with the Houston Texans. So if you wanted to kind of find a little bit of a needle to thread here for the NFL, they could conduct this investigation and say, we're not making any determination about what happened with Deshaun Watson and these women, but all of the evidence is pretty straightforward and clear that during the course of the 2020 season, Deshaun Watson was flagrantly violating COVID protocols in the NFL, which demanded that all players restrict their access to all extra outside the locker room personnel, extraneous personnel, and he didn't do that. So it's possible the NFL personal conduct policy, they may suspend him for a half year before they even have to make a determination about whether or not there was any sexual assault. And they can just say, hey, we've discovered significant COVID protocol violations, and at a minimum, we're going to suspend Deshaun Watson for a substantial amount of games because we provided him with notice of what the rules were, and he flagrantly violated those by having all of these different women providing him massages outside of the team facility. Was he wearing a mask during these alleged encounters? I don't know. But certainly he was engaged with women that were not in any way affiliated sometimes with the Houston Texans, and the close contact, body contact, would certainly, during the massages, I would think, have created the potential for major COVID-related issues. If you remember, even when someone came, for instance, the barber did, to the Kansas City Chiefs to cut hair, if you remember, they were testing the barber, the Chiefs were, and they found out that the barber was COVID positive, and there was a little bit of a scare about whether any of the players might also be COVID positive for the Super Bowl. So if the teams were being that careful about where their guys were getting their haircuts, that they were COVID testing the barber, I would think that the team, at a minimum, had to see that Deshaun Watson, with all of these different women that he was contacting and interacting with, was violating COVID protocols in a significant manner in that respect too. But the bigger picture here remains that Deshaun Watson is facing a challenge from the legal system that could question whether he's able to continue playing football in the NFL. These allegations are significant enough that if criminal charges are brought in conjunction with these civil case lawsuits, and if Deshaun Watson were charged for sexual assault for multiple of these incidents, he could go to jail for years and years and years, and he may face a long-running judicial system nightmare. Remember, we're past the era where you could continue to play while standing trial for some form of sexual assault. There's no way that Kobe Bryant would be able to fly from court to playing for the LA Lakers in the same day like he did back in the early 2000s. That's an untenable position for an athlete now. Now, you can argue that that's what the position should be. And I wouldn't even necessarily disagree with you. I think if you're not in jail, in my opinion, you should be eligible to play football or basketball or baseball or hockey if somebody wants to pay you to play. And so I understand the idea, hey, Kobe's standing trial for rape and he's attending hearings and then he's flying back to LA and showing up and playing in basketball games. There's no way that would be able to happen today. But I can understand why that precedent actually makes sense, because if you truly believe in a presumption of innocence and that someone is not guilty until they're proven to be guilty, then you should be able to make a living even if you are being accused of a very serious crime by multiple different women who all appear to be credible to a large extent. But to me, as I watched all these details play out yesterday, I thought to myself, I think Deshaun Watson has completely bollocksed this entire situation. And there is no way to defend his initial statement when I think Tony Busby, the plaintiff's attorney here, got him to issue a denial when he thought there was only one woman who was going to accuse him of sexual assault. And before all was said and done, this was, I believe, a setup in some way. I do think there was a setup component to this where they wanted to get a denial from Deshaun Watson thinking, oh, there's only one woman who's accusing me. And then they had a couple of more that they were ready to also put out as lawsuits. But then I think all of the attention and publicity on the way that Deshaun Watson has behaved has also led more women to come forward once they found out that they were not alone in believing that they were mistreated by Deshaun Watson. Because if you think about this scenario from the masseuse perspective, let's talk about it from her perspective. We talk about it a lot from Deshaun's perspective. The women in this case may have been terrified of saying anything publicly about Deshaun Watson because they feel like their career as masseuses may well end. They may work with other athletes. They may work with other famous people. And as soon as they go public with allegations, other people might say, well, I don't know if I want that person working with me. I don't know that I want to be in the same camp here. And so I think that is where we are right now. This is a huge mess going forward, and I'm not sure how it gets resolved anytime in the near future.